skila me teri monto ala enya macho ai go la Anora halki muotta sovan ojo jochore kolo Natera halki kuloa ten voce vel kolo Natera halki kuloa ten voce vel yogo Nademun kaljavu jiste chankuakte lake voce meattel kojoloa Teña goyo muche chue paengang Puori tjahkima.
Keitto, Vimme. You hear me in this microphone, thank you. Everything works until it doesn't. Burvatime Gaitones, welcome everybody to this third Sami Cultural Policy Summit. We are here in Derna, Tärnaby at Ailese new Sami institution. And I want to welcome you to my ancestral lands, the Sami lands of Derna, and we are located by the shore of the lake Gautajauri. Michael will be the host today, so we will see him more later. So now I will give the word to Ellen Dahlback, and she will tell you a little more about the rules of today's meeting. Keitto, and welcome again.
Keitto ja Burre Edith. Good morning. Many of you are perhaps familiar with Zoom, our digital platform for today, but not all of you, so we take a quick guiding tour through practical information and rules for the summit on Zoom. Mon len Ramavol Ellebygge, ja mon len Odda okti hepaheitsi viermiko fjertmadagan. Bodan skanis, ja dal orun ja barkan sikiskanis, ja gironin. I am Ellen-Berit Dahlback, and I am the newly appointed coordinator for the Viermiko network. I come from Skanik on the Norwegian side of Sápmi, and now I have my base both in Skanik and in Giron on the Swedish side. I have previously worked as the producer and general manager for the Sami festival Markumienno. Here I work with Sami crafts. Viermiko is a cultural policy network that works to strengthen the professional cultural life on the Swedish side of Sápmi. The network was grounded 2 years ago by 6 Sami institutions, which you will meet later in today's program. Then back to Zoom. Audio and camera. Mute your microphones and turn off your camera during the whole summit. If you forget, we will mute you and turn your camera off. The microphone and camera button are located at the bottom left of your screen. Check the program at Giron Sami Theater's homepage before the summit starts for updates and news. At the homepage, choose Viermiko in the menu. Questions and answers. Questions for the participant in each session during the summit can be addressed through the chat function within Zoom to the participant named 00 question. The chat button is located in the menu at the bottom of your screen. So is the language interpretation button. The summit's language will be English, but there will be interpretation to Russian language. We will record the summit. The recording will later be found on Giron Sami Teater's homepage. Choose VRMK and then Historik in the menu. Individual recording of the summit is not possible. For those of you participating in today's program with speeches, remember to look into your camera, not at your screen, when you are speaking. Savande din sida Bori Chokima. I wish you a good summit, and I now pass the word on to Mikael and Maja.
Gito Ellen. I am one of the producers, and Maja Bonta, she will show up a little bit later here. She's the other one. We produced this summit together. My welcoming will include the connection to land, of course, and to ancestors, but also to the socio-geographic place and space-time in the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu's meaning. I also include findings from my own research that gives arguments to strengthen the Sami cultural field, the reason why we have gathered to this Sami Cultural Policy Summit. Boris Bohtime, Monove Mikael Lindblad, Hovda, Giron Sami Teater. Welcome, I am Mikael Lindblad, one of the producers of the summit and the president, or if you prefer, chair of Giron Sami Teater. First of all, I want to give my thanks to the cultural network VRMK and Derna Cultural Center, ILES, for giving me the possibility to speak here and to you all. And Gito, thanks to all my ancestors, making it possible for me to be here, giving me a contemporary voice and agency talking about the future. I want to salute those who organized Samis more than 100 years ago. My thoughts are specifically going to Elsa Laula, who was from this neighborhood around Derna, Tärnaby. She was a front runner at her time, and the content of her published pamphlet from 1904, Facing Life or Death, is in many ways still valid 117 years later. Sami women like Elsa Laula are in many ways carrying the culture in their bodies and their minds, connecting history and future. I salute and thank them. At this summit, we are mostly talking about the future, well aware of history and the present. So I want to focus on the young ones and those in becoming. In my research on young Sami and their school-to-work transitions, as a researcher at Umeå University, I'm using life stories of young Sami men and women as my empirical material. My findings so far are: the participants have a close relationship to the extended Sami family. All had colonial experiences of being Sami, self-experienced or through their families. They met different forms of discriminations regarding language, culture, and identity. Their narratives portray, through their career choices, their will to contribute to the Sami community, to develop Sami languages, cultural expressions, and reindeer herding, or improved psychosocial health. In my meaning, their individual career choices seems to take place within a collective responsibility, which includes a relationship with Sápmi as a community, its history and its future. The importance of recognition, justice, and possibilities for ethnic openness are factors for agency in their career path. My study indicates that there are reasons to speak of a collective horizon of action rather than just an individual one. A quote from a young woman, "Sapmi deserves quality. I want to show the majority society we got quality." Another one, "Spend time with the elders for sharing their knowledge and traditions. Learn everything you can before they are gone. But don't forget yourself and what you feel is important." My findings goes in line with the report from the International Research Center Nordregio, established by the Nordic Council of Ministers. So there are several findings that are common in our studies. These findings gives argument to strengthen the Sami cultural sector and the importance of creating job opportunities in the cultural field where we are. Finally, my recommendation, in line with Vladimir Ko, are to triple the funding from the Swedish state from less than 20 millions to 60 millions. That would be decent. And to increase the numbers of Sami cultural institutions from 9 to at least 15, involving music, joik, filming, dubbing, dance, and cultural centers over all Sapmi. Thank you. And now we'll give the word to Maja Bonta, the second and the other producer.
First of all, as a producer, I will welcome you all and thank you for joining this conference, this summit. I will read a poem of Nils Aslak Valkeapää, the most famous poet in Sapmi. You know, brother, you understand, sister, but what do I say to strangers who spread out all over? How shall I answer questions that come from a different world? How can I explain that I cannot live in just one place and still live when I live among all this tundra? You are standing in my bed. My privy is behind the bushes. The sun is my lamp. The lake, my wash bowl. Thank you.
Thank you, Maja. The welcoming is over. Now we are going to the first session, Sami Agency in Sapmi and the Nordic countries, and the moderator.
Yeah. Maybe that was my calling, or what, Michael? Well, okay. I guess it's my turn. Thank you so much, Michael, Maja, and Vladimir Ko for inviting me to this session and also asking me to moderate a conversation that have themes that I love to discuss. I'm really happy to be able to contribute to the third summit, which I think is hugely important to take part in and important that exists as a platform to discuss Sami cultural policy. We need that. And with this great panel today, I'm hopeful that we will have a great discussion. First, shortly about the Sami Council. It's an interest organization for all organizations in Sweden, Norway, Russia, and Finland. We established in 1956 and are today one of the oldest indigenous political organizations still active. The Sami Council's primary aim is to work for a united Sápmi and recognition for the Sami as a nation across national borders. We have offices all over Sápmi, from Murmansk.
У нас есть офисы в Мурманске, Уmeå, Karasjoki, Kautokeino.
And the Sami Council works mainly through our 4 different units to promote and secure Sami interests and rights. We have our EU unit that you will meet later today, our human rights unit, an Arctic and environmental unit, and the cultural unit, which I am the head of. The Sami Council works to strengthen Sami arts and cultural field as one united field. Because, of course, the Sami arts and cultural field operates borderless between Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. We work to ensure that both Sami and national institutions and organizations recognize the Sami cultural field as one Sami art and cultural field across borders. We have one of few funding possibilities where all Sami artists and cultural workers can apply for funding no matter where in Sápmi they live. The Sami Council's definition of culture is quite wide and reflects our way of life, and therefore we support both traditional and modern Sami art and culture through our fundings. We work also supporting cultural industries, for example, through the trademarks Sami Dochi and Sami Made, and we work to ensure protection of Sami culture and cultural elements, which is the property of the Sami people. And I don't know if I have my slide going. But probably Vladimir K have started it, but I can't see it. But if so, please head to the next slide. The Sami Council have initiated and started the conference Kulttuuri Sápmi with the aim of gathering the Sami art and cultural field. Okay, we can't see the pictures. Well, that's a shame, but I'll continue and maybe we'll have the slide up and running. There you go, perfect. So if we can just head to the second slide. Perfect, thank you. So the Sami Council, we have initiated and started the conference Kulttuuri Sápmi with the aim of gathering the Sami art and cultural field, which is a field with not that many meeting places where the industry can meet, discuss, grow and develop. The conference has also grown into a podcast to create more platforms where the Sami cultural debate can take place. And now during Corona, we have also established a think tank with artists, festivals and cultural workers from all over Sápmi to work and map out the status quo for the field and also to create new thoughts for the survival of the cultural field. In addition, we also did a survey in the Sami artist field this summer to gather more information about how the Corona situation affected the Sami art and cultural field. Because there wasn't really any focus on how the Sami art field was coping, only a belief from the national authorities that the Sami art field would also be supported through the different national measures and crisis packages. At the same time, the feedback from the Sami cultural field showed that the various measures designed to support the cultural field during the pandemic did not sufficiently meet the Sami cultural workers and cultural institutions. And Sami cultural field also became quite invisible in the national surveys that were designed to map out how the pandemic were affecting the national cultural fields. So a need to gather knowledge on the effects of the pandemic became very important for the Sami Council in order to create something that could guide on how to organize the Sami cultural policy instruments. Next slide, please. The main findings reinforce that the Sami and cultural field market is by nature cross-border, and that the closed borders have major economic consequences for both individual art and cultural practitioners, Sami festivals, and other Sami cultural institutions. Not only is the Sami art fields market crossing the Sami borders, but it's also a global market through the different indigenous networks that our field has. Next slide. Next slide, please. Almost 80% of the participants answered that the closed borders have affected collaboration opportunities and therefore their income. Next slide, please. "13 of 14 Sami cultural institutions answered that the closing of borders affected their collaborations. Next slide, please. Some of the quotes from the survey says that I have not been able to meet customers or take jobs on the other side of the borders. All my work activities are pan-Sami and or international. The delayed completion of jobs in Sápmi in the north and therefore delayed billing has led to a tight economy. The result of the survey also shows that the different subsidies and compensation schemes did not sufficiently meet the Sami art and cultural field, especially due to the cultural field's cross-border nature. Feedback from the Sami cultural field shows that the different available cultural fundings, especially work grants, have been really important for the survival of the field during the pandemic, to keep up the production levels. The discussion in the Kultursami think tank also echoes this, and we have also talked about the need of support mechanism where the field also encounter Sami cultural competence and the opportunity to use our languages. This is of course also about the field's possibility for self-determination, which is also in a very weak position today. I think the Corona situation has made it even clearer, and that's why I'm talking about it so much today. The Sami art and cultural field do not only exist individually within the different national borders. It is one common field. And I believe we suffer from a huge knowledge gap about the Sami art and cultural field. What are the Sami cultural field's own premises for support and development? Do we really meet the needs of the field through support mechanisms built after the different colonial borders when the field itself is working across borders? Last slide, please. If we see the Sami art and culture field as one common ecosystem, which is a common comparison when talking about how industries are independent, how does our ecosystem function, grow, develop, and thrive? When parts of the ecosystem shuts down, in our case, close borders, how does that affect the ecosystem? Will it then help to nourish only one part of the ecosystem? What about an unbalanced nourishment, which is in our case, the way we support the culture field today only within the different national borders? And how much potential of growth do an ecosystem have if it's understood, supported, and nourished correctly? Which potential comes to life if the support mechanism actually echoes how the Sami art and cultural field functions today? I think the Sami art and culture fields today has a huge amount of unused potential and possibilities. If we only have a look at the huge international interest in Sami art, film, and other cultural products, and then add the nature of the field with networks and market across the national borders and the indigenous market. My belief is that it isn't either impossible or hard to support and create support mechanism that actually supports the field and open up the field's true potential. But first, we need one basic acknowledgement, that the Sami art and cultural field is one common field that works across borders in Sami. And I hope we can get a discussion going on today on how to make that happen, which is a discussion we need to take both here in Sami, but also on national and Nordic level. This leads me to further present today's panel, where we have gathered the 3 Sami parliaments to share more information about how they today support the Sami cultural field, what they see as both challenges and possibilities. I have also challenged them to reflect about how they can achieve how we can achieve a common Sami cultural policy. What does it take? And I would also like them to share knowledge about how they see the COVID-19 situation has affected the Sami art and cultural field. And if you in the audience have any questions to the panel, please feel welcome to ask and write them in the chat to 00 questions. And with these words, I would like to start to present the rest of the panel with introducing the Vice President of the Sami Parliament on Swedish side of the border, and the former Head of Cultural Unit in the Sami Council, Lars Mikael Itzi. Läge på det.
Joo, kiitos. Thank you very much, Ologito, Christina. I will be talking about the Sami Parliament's approach to culture. What is Sami culture? And I will also be talking about the current state of Sami culture and what we do from the Sami Parliament to support our cultural life. And finally, I will also go into what I see as important issues that have to be dealt with for our culture to continue to flourish. Firstly, some words about how we define culture, and this will echo parts of what Christina Hetta just talked about, but I think this is just strengthening the case that we are presenting, so to say. The basis of Sami culture is that all parts of our existence are joined together in natural unity. We see ourselves as a natural part of the eternal cycle, and Sami culture has a holistic perspective that includes current cultural expressions, as well as our cultural heritage and cultural environment. Sami culture originates from our traditional knowledge and our relation to nature. It is a way of life. For example, the life of a family-based reindeer herding, family-based reindeer herding, where the changing of the seasons and the reindeer migration to different grazing lands affects everyday life. But it could be also everyday life affected by access to fish and game. The activities, knowledge, and economy of all family members are important in family-based livelihoods. Reindeer herding, hunting, and fishing A way of life close to nature, language, and strong family relations are still important cornerstones for the traditional as well as the innovative Sami arts and cultural scenes. Sami cultural expressions include the artistic expressions and the activities of our institutions, associations, and organizations. The Sami cultural institutions, organizations, and cultural centers contribute to a feeling of belonging, which helps resilience towards mental illness. It is important for the Sami Parliament to create conditions that strengthen and develop a vivid Sami cultural life in order to maintain viable and sustainable Sami living environments. We must see Sami culture from a holistic perspective that includes what you are as well as what you do. It is a challenge for the Sami Parliament to increase understanding for this Sami holistic perspective on a vivid Sami cultural life, in contrast to the majority society's understanding of what culture is. We have to remind the majority society about our very different perspectives and starting points. In 1977, the Sami people were recognized as an indigenous people by the government of Sweden. Since then, several government inquiries have concluded that the Sami have a close relation to land and water, which is crucial to maintain our culture, and therefore our use of land and water has to be protected. These inquiries have also clarified that we as an indigenous people have a right to cultural autonomy, which requires also a certain level of self-governance. In 2010, after a revision approved by the Parliament, we, the Sami, were finally recognized as an indigenous people also in the Swedish Constitution. Looking at this, that land and water are crucial to maintain our culture, one should understand the effect of our holistic perspective. The use of land and water are integral parts of our lives, our culture, and heritage. And that's why it is so important for us to protect our lands from clear cutting of forests, loss of land to mining, windmills, infrastructure projects, and so on. The land is crucial to our livelihoods, our languages, our mindset, and our culture. Therefore, we have large expectations on our government to make necessary revisions in legislation to protect our rights to land and water, and I hope this will help to secure stable conditions for our culture. International rights for indigenous peoples and conventions for the protection of minorities that Sweden is obliged to follow have two central principles. One is about non-discrimination and positive measures. The other is about the right to effective participation in decision-making processes concerning us and our culture. We still have some big challenges in regards to both of these principles. Looking at the Sami civil society and cultural life that is funded by cultural grants from the Sami Parliament, we see that the needs of the community are much larger than what can be accommodated by our budget. Only half of what our organizations applied for their activities could be covered by our grants, and only about 30% of the applied amount for cultural projects could be granted. The Sami Parliament see a need for increased cultural funding to meet the needs of the cultural community and to create long-term stability for our civil society. One specific step in this direction is to support the Giron Sami Theatre, the theatre's endeavor to be appointed as a Sami national stage. The scope of the work that the Giron Sami Theatre does today is already equal to that of a national stage, but it lacks the resources that a national stage receives. Another example is about our government's management of Sami culture and cultural heritage. The Sami cultural issues are spread out on several government agencies, such as the Cultural Council, the National Heritage Board, the County Administrative Boards, the Institute of Language and Folklore, and so on. By spreading our issues thin like this, there is a risk for fragmentation of focus and a decline of attention on the Sami issues. The Sami Parliament Act clearly states the responsibilities and role of the Sami Parliament in regards to the Sami culture, but still, almost at the age of 30, the Sami Parliament still does not have the full responsibility for our own issues regarding Sami culture, cultural heritage, and cultural environments. Based on the rights of self-governance, the Sami Parliament should have the full responsibility for the management of Sami culture and cultural heritage in Sweden. And in regards to our cultural heritage, I would also like to mention important work that is being done about repatriation of the Sami human remains. In 2007, the Sami Parliament demanded a full identification of all Sami skeletal remains in all of governmental archives, a mapping of how museums and institutions obtain these remains, and repatriation of the Sami human remains. Since we have cooperated with government agencies, the Swedish Church and Swedish museums to put focus on this issue, and there's a common understanding that the government has to take a bigger responsibility on these issues on a national level. And we are demanding that Sami human remains have to be repatriated and reburied in Sami. The government should take a bigger responsibility to make this happen. And a revision of legislation and research ethics is needed, but also a clarification of roles and responsibilities of different actors in order for this work to develop further on the national level. We know that there are high expectations on the Sami Parliament in regards to the needs and demands of the Sami people. But we also see that we have a need to increase our capacity to meet the requirements, needs, and demand on the Sami Parliament from external actors such as the other agencies, government agencies, but also internally within the Sami context to meet these expectations that the Sami community have and that the cultural sector have on the development of Sami culture. I hope that our self-governance will be strengthened in order for us to reach our goals so that the Sami culture, in our wide perspective, can continue to flourish. I can also shortly mention, I didn't plan it into the speech, but I can shortly mention the support that was given to Corona from the Sami Parliament. We have received so far 8 million kronor for crisis support to the cultural sector to mitigate the effects of the pandemic, the Corona pandemic. In last year, we received 4 million, and 46 applicants received this support from us, and we were able to grant basically all of the 4 million kronor that we received, and we see that a lot of cultural workers, cultural institutions are affected strongly by this Corona pandemic. So we're really glad that we did get those grants. And with those short words, I will thank you, Ologiitu, for your attention.
Ologiitu Lashmingel for a very good and interesting introduction to the work of the Sami Parliament on Swedish side. And then I would like to introduce Piritta Näkkäljärvi, member of the Sami Parliament on Finnish side, head of the Sami Parliament's Cultural Committee, and also on a daily basis, the economist. Please take the floor, Piritta.
Thank you, Christina. Kiitos, Christina. And just to check, is my picture showing okay, not in a funny tilted way? You can see my video in a normal format. Very good. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to speak, and thanks for the kind introduction. I will skip that from my part, and I'll go directly into my presentation that I have divided into two parts. I will first briefly introduce the Sami Parliament here on the Finnish side, and then talk about the cultural sector more specifically. And I bring greetings from Inari, where this picture is from. In the picture, you can see our cultural center Sajos, which is the home base of the Sami Parliament in Finland. And we, the Sami Parliament in Finland, we are the official representative body of the indigenous people Sami here on the Finnish side. And the Sami Parliament was legislated back in 1996. And before that, we had the Sami delegation since 1973. And there are 21 of us representatives or members of the parliament, and we are elected every 4 years. And at the Sami Parliament in Finland, we don't have any political parties or lists, but the system is designed so that there is representation from all the 4 municipalities in the Sami home region here in the north. Let's then go on the next slide and focus on the cultural sector more specifically. The cultural sector that supports the Sami cultural activities and Sami organizations. And the main tool is the Sami Cultural Grant. It is the only cultural grant in Finland for Sami artists and cultural workers. And it is distributed by the Cultural Committee of the Sami Parliament in Finland. And that committee is chaired by myself. And we distribute the grants based on an application for different sectors of Sami arts and culture, the whole scene, including also Sami organizations. So it's not only the artists, cultural workers, but also the civil society who receives funding from the Sami Cultural Grant. And of the total, which is 179,000 in 2001, 15,000 goes to Nordic Sami artists organizations. And I forgot to mention to start with that the total budget of the Sami Parliament in Finland is approximately 8.1 million euros this year, including state subsidies and incomes from own activities. And the support for the Sami culture, the Sami Cultural Grant, comes from the Ministry of Education budget. And in case you're wondering, this is not a typo. It's not supposed to be 1.79 million that the Sami Cultural Grant, it really is this small number, 179,000 euros per year. And I want to open this a little bit. If you go to the next slide, then please. Let's look at concrete examples of what we support and also the order of magnitude of the cultural grants to give you a better idea of what we're talking about. And here I have gathered examples of the projects that we have supported this year. And as said, the total support was 179,000. And that, by the way, has remained on the same level since 2014, unfortunately. And this sum this year was distributed altogether to 65 organizations or projects that were pitched to us. And the average grant then amounts to about 2,800 euros. And some of the examples that I'm really happy about give a really varied picture of the Sami cultural activities here on the Finnish side. For example, we are funding the 50-year anniversary of a local Sami association with the average amount of the grant. Then we have support for a Sami music concert locally for 3,700. We also support the publication of an Inari Sami language magazine, which is, of course, a very seriously endangered language, and their magazine receives 9,000 from us this year. We support a visual art exhibition of an up-and-coming, really young artist. We are able to support him with 1,000 euros. We are supporting novel writing in Sami language with 2,800. We also gave 1,900 to writing and composing heavy music in all 3 Sami languages spoken here on the Finnish side. We have support for designing new knitting patterns for 1,900, stories for children in Sami language in digital format, 2,700, also Sami language puppet play, 1,900, and the last example I brought up is a grant for artistic development of a young up-and-coming artist, 1,500. As you can see from these examples, the average grant that we give out is very, very low. One of the issues is that within this structure, it is impossible to offer sufficient support for professional Sami artists who are trying to make their living out of art. The impact of a single project is also quite limited. I give you an example, the support for the Inari Sami language magazine. This is the only Inari Sami magazine print media in the entire world. And a big part of their budget comes from our cultural grant. Even if we wanted to target language revitalization such activities by Sami associations and others in the third sector, we have very limited means of doing so, and then consequently the impact of the supported activities is limited. And having said this, the 9,000 is of course among the highest that we have given out. This is the second largest grant we give out this year. The others are in the 1,000 to 3,000 range. In addition, one of the issues here on the Finnish side is that we do not have a mechanism in Finland focusing on Sami entrepreneurs. So we also support projects from the Sami Cultural Grant that in a way overlap with entrepreneurial activities of the artists and cultural workers, like the knitting pattern project here. Finally, in our culture political program for 2020 to 2023, we have set an objective. We want to work with the government of Finland to raise the Sami Cultural Grant to the level of 300,000. And we really hope that despite the challenging times, we are able to achieve this goal in order to ensure better funding for the Sami Cultural Grant and raising the Sami Cultural Grant from the current 179,000 to 300,000. After all, this is the only grant supporting specifically Sami artists and cultural workers, and this is a grant that is widely distributed to Sami associations, cultural workers, and artists, supporting their work in all 3 Sami languages spoken here on the Finnish side. And with the last slide, I thank you and bring greetings from inside the SAJOS. This picture is taken where on the walls of the SAJOS Parliamentary Hall, Solju, we are showing very proudly Sami art there on the background by our very own artist, Outi Bieski. And if you have any questions to me afterwards, you can also reach out to me via email, and you can find me on Twitter. And online, you can reach me anytime. And I promise to answer any questions or if there are any cooperation ideas afterwards, really happy to follow up on those. Thank you so much. Kiitos.
Ui, ollut viihtuu, Piritta. So then we'll go on further to the last panelist for this discussion. It's Magne Svineng, who is the Director of Industry, Culture and Health in the Sami Parliament on Norwegian side. The floor is yours, Magne.
Kiitos, Kristina, and and thank you for the invitation. I would like to try to share this screen with you. Let me see if it's possible. And then we go to that one. Can you see the? Yes, that's. I will start my text or story in 2019 in Rovaniemi. The three Sami parliaments, the Sami Council, the Sami Arts Council had a meeting during the Arctic Arts Summit. And there we also met the Norwegian Art Council, Kulturrådet, the Swedish Art Council, Statens kulturråd Sverige, and Taike, the Finnish Art Council. And we wanted to challenge those three national art councils to collaborate with us to shape a common strategy or a policy of how to strengthen Sami art and culture in Sapmi. We had to admit now that we didn't quite succeed with that hairy goal, but we haven't given up that goal yet. But we did agree on mapping what kind of support or economic instruments or tools are available for Sami artists, whether she or he lives in Norway, Sweden, or Finland. So the Sami Parliament on the Norwegian side hired a company named Visiona in Alta to do this mapping for us. So in November last year, they handed over the report to us. And maybe some of you have helped them with data for the report. And thank you for those who did that. So I will shortly present some of the numbers and conclusions from the report. But before we go to the report, I would like to say a few words about how we work on the Sami Parliament on the Norwegian side, and how we deal with and work with art and culture issues. And we can divide it into 4 main areas. And the first one is to try to give the Sami artists better terms or conditions. Here we have this agreement or the negotiations with the Sami Arts Council yearly. And second, we have the funds for the music, literature, arrangements, etc., where the institutions or artists can apply for grants. And the third, we have the funding or responsibility for about 60 Sami institutions or receivers of direct grants from us. Museums, theaters, festivals, media, institutions, and so on. And the fourth one is we have the project of campaigns or which we on our own initiate and implement. And the whole culture budget for this year is about 145 million Norwegian kroner. It should be about 14.5 million euros. So back to the report on funding in Sapmi. As you can see, it's the first one is the difference between our 3 Sami parliaments in economic frame for art and culture support, as Britta and Lars Miguel also has spoken. In this first table, you can see the numbers both in frame and in how many granted support was given. The numbers are from 2017 to 2019. So of course the numbers can be different this year or last year, and of course the The report may have some that is not quite correct, but it gives a picture of how it is. And of course, there's a big difference in what responsibility our 3 Sami parliaments have. For instance, how our theaters or museums or so on are financed from the government or from the Sami parliament. But anyhow, there is a difference in possibility for support or grants, depending on which side of the border you live. Yeah, and the second table on this slide, it's the other Sami funding, such as the Sami Arts Council, the International Sami Film Institute, and the Sami Council. And these can also give grants to Sami artist institutions all over Sami, as you know. And yeah. But let's look at the big money, the art councils, the national art councils. Here is the billions in the Norwegian kroner at least. Also, the numbers of given grants is a lot, over 5,000, both in Sweden and in Norway per year. And we did ask them in this report how many or how much of these are given to Sami applicants or Sami artists. And so what do you think they answered? Did we get an answer? No, they don't have the numbers. And they don't categorize the Sami projects. So we don't know how many of this or how much is funded or is from to the Sami projects. Or it's partly true. At the Swedish Art Council, they have numbers for Sami projects funded from the post, which they call national minorities. But this is a very, very small post compared to their whole budget. Besides from that, there's a long list of other funding possibilities in these 3 countries. I don't need to, both, probably all of these. But you have all the film institutes, the musics, and yeah, in that. On the next slide, we have some fundings for the literature. And there are several other funding sources and foundations, and also the one who export art abroad. And of course, as you see in the last point here is the regional authorities, such as fylkeskommuner on the Norwegian side and län on the Swedish side. And then you have these cross-border fundings, where the Nordic Council of Ministers is the biggest one and has and the others' names here are more like funding or stimulate to more collaboration between artists or actors on both sides of the borders. The report I have been referring to, it also have some advices in the end, as a good report shall have. And for the first, it's the responsibility that national funds have. And among some of the national funds and institutions on the Norwegian side, it has been a kind of a fear of touching Sami projects and other Sami issues. And for some years now, we have been repeating to them that the Sami parliament alone on the Norwegian side cannot have the whole responsibility for taking care of and develop Sami art and culture. This is a matter also for national funds, institutions and authorities. And it has gotten better. Our collaboration and dialogue with the national institutions has been better. But now we have to challenge them to categorize better in their funding, so we can see the trend in how many Sami projects are funded. As it is now, we don't know if the Sami artists apply or how many get grants. So it's hard to tell if the national funds take their responsibility as they should. The second advice is to better the guidance for those who wants to apply among these many national or regional funds. A kind of competence broker between fundings and artists is suggested. In Norway, they have this model in the industry development, also in the Sami industry and creative industry, which do work quite well. So it should be possible to do it in the art and culture field as well. A third and a fourth advice is a portal where you can could collect all the available fundings from all the 3 or 4 countries, and maybe at the same time try to standardize the application forms. This could make it easier to apply and achieve a higher share of Sami projects funded in national funds. So for the conclusion and the end, what have we learned from the pandemic concerning Sami art and culture? And as Christina already has mentioned, the Sami art field is one ecosystem. We do collaborate over the borders, and we are depending on each other. And during the pandemic, we have more clearly seen how much the closed borders have made it difficult being a Sami artist or a Sami festival or an institution. So in my presentation, I have to try to show that the funding of Sami art and culture is far away one ecosystem. It is truly divided by the borders. Now it's more like which side of the borders you were born or where in Sapmi you live that decides how much you can get in grants or scholarship. This obviously creates an imbalance in the Sami art sector and weakens the possibility for our art field. And can we do something about that? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your very interesting presentation, Magne. And we have already a lot of questions or some questions in the chat about where this report of yours can be found. Is it to be found on the Samedigi webpage, or?
We can see that it is published on our webpage, yes.
That's great. So for all the audience, in a good Sami time, it will be published on the webpage. And we have a couple of minutes to discuss this further, and I'm really glad that you all brought up or came to this panel today with more information about how you support the cultural field in the countries, and it is truly you get quite speechless when you see that the slide from Magne, where you see the huge differences of funding within the different national borders. And of course, what I also see is that the different fundings within the different national borders also creates different working conditions for our artists and culture workers, and with the common view of our cultural field being one common field, how do we achieve a common Sami cultural policy today just within the Sami community? Because we are also divided into the system of the colonial borders. I think that could be the first question for the panel. And yes, Lars Miguel. We can't hear you, Lars Miguel.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Yes. I've been thinking about this, and basically I came to the conclusion that we do have already today the possibility within each of the Sami communities, Sami parliaments, to form our cultural grants as we want to, basically. We don't control the budget necessarily, but we can form the grants and distribute them however we would like to, roughly said anyways. And why don't we then already have a common cultural grant across borders that is the same, that creates the same conditions for Sami artists, the Sami cultural community in all of Sapmi? Why haven't we done that already? And I think I've come to the conclusion that it's a challenge of capacity. The Sami parliaments have to coordinate, we the Sami communities have to coordinate policy within all of our community. It's the grassroots, we have the organizations, we have cultural workers, and then we have the parties within the parliament. And after that process is done, it has to go to the parliaments for decisions, and then it will have to be processed through the boards, and there's a lot of different organs that has to touch upon these issues, and it's quite a big process already today to manage to create policy documents within one country of Sapmi. And to then expand that to have processes regarding all 4 countries, all of Sapmi, coordinating all of these grassroots organizations, parliaments and parties and so on. It's a huge project, and I think what it lands on the point that we don't have the capacity to do that. And in the end, it's because our democratic system is underfunded. The parliaments are underfunded, and the civil society is underfunded, and this results in a lack of capacity for us to process those kind of issues in that large. In a large context like that, and therefore we haven't achieved that yet. So basically, we don't have self-governance in those issues because we are underfunded. Thank you.
Kiitos, Lars Miguel. I saw Magne also raised his hand.
Yeah, and I think that our aim or goal should be that we have to get more of the big monies. And the art councils, they have together almost 5 billion Norwegian kroner. And it should be possible to kind of altogether, let's say 1 million kroner from each one of them as a start. And maybe 1 million from each government. That could make it 6 million. And we could have a start to create a common Sami culture fund in Sapmi, where we have one sort of rules or policy, and I think that could be a kind of challenge to all our governments and art councils. Why don't we get our a small share of your money, and we can create something very exciting together?
And perhaps I can build on that. Yes, thank you, Christina. That's a great question. And maybe a couple of points I want to hit. I think we have a great common ground and common foundation that we can build on. When I was listening to both the presentations from the big brother, big sister Sami parliament, so to speak, we share the same values, we share the same way of thinking, and so on. So there's a lot of work that has already been done that we could build on. And then a second thought comes to mind, and that is building on the cross-border, borderless thinking that Christina, you raised. That has been highlighted during the COVID pandemic, how the Sami arts and culture scene is inherently borderless and cross-border and Nordic, plus of course the Russian side. So perhaps there would be a possibility to build a whole new Nordic funding mechanism. And of course, two of our countries, Finland and Sweden, are part of the EU. So probably we could build something with EU funding as well. And that's something that we could develop together, because that then opens up new possibilities and not just relying on the national structures. Thank you.
This is a really interesting conversation. It's just such a pity that we have run out of time. And hopefully we will be able to continue this conversation, because we really we need to go from words into action and start to, as Lars Miguel also are talking about, in practice see how we can achieve and build a common Sami cultural policy. And as a last word, I want to bring a greeting from the cultural conferences that the Sami Council have held for decades, where at each of the conference a common Sami cultural fund is brought up on the agenda. So I think that this is something that the Sami art and culture field has been missing and would really need. So actually, for information to the different Sami parliaments, the Sami Council has actually established now a common Sami cultural fund. So that could be a starting point. But with these words, I have to give a huge thank you to the panelists, Oulu Gihtu, for a very interesting discussion and sharing a lot of important information. Hopefully we can continue this discussion another time. And now back to the studio at Ailis. Thank you for our behalf. Gihtu Miino Asiautas.
Gihtu.
My microphone, is it on now? Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this session. And you can't stop thinking about if you're born on the right or the wrong side. And that is something to deal with. And it gives for those who are in becoming that this could be better off in the three countries. And the Finnish situation is difficult, seriously difficult. The Sweden is really difficult, and Norway needs more to develop their cultural field. So thanks you very much. And a short information before we go to the next session. There are almost 200 participants in this Zoom meeting. Participants are from Sweden, Norway, Finland, of course, but also from England, USA, Canada, France, and Japan. Now I will turn over to the next moderator. It is Antti Sombi. He's an independent indigenous intellectual and associate professor of law, faculty of law in the Arctic University of Norway, Tromsø, Ramsar. So Antti, are you there somewhere?
I sit here and I see all these beautiful people here. I'm very happy to get the opportunity to lead this next session. It is an old Sami saying, which I hope it's maybe also a spell, that when times are good in Norway, then they are bad in Finland, Sweden, and Russia. And when things are good in Russia, then they are bad in Norway, Finland, and Sweden. And I think that we should somehow get that spell broken. Our approach during this session is about the floor and the walls, the legal frameworks, because law often addresses the minimum standards that shall be applied. And the public policies often make the walls for where one can reach. And we have the help of an excellent panel of 3 participants here who will guide us through these questions. And we will start with a European look at legal frameworks and public policies regarding Sami cultural life, because Sami culture is also European culture, and in many respects also carries very unique characteristics of European culture. Imagine Joik, for example, as a European cultural expression. It's a very powerful picture. And our first panelist is Marie Hagsgaard, who works at the Council of Europe, and she will help us with the first contribution here. The floor is yours, Marie.
Thank you, Ander. So let me see if I can share the screen with you. So, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk about Sami cultural rights according to the Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities, which is a European Council convention to protect indigenous people and minorities across Europe. And I'm also going to speak about the Swedish Minority Act. I work as the president of a committee of experts who monitor the application of the Framework Convention for National Minorities in 39 European countries. And one of our important tasks is to check that Sami get their cultural rights in Russia, Finland, Sweden and Norway, because all these 4 states within Sápmi have ratified this convention. So I think it's important that both state officials, local officials, and Sami know what cultural rights this convention contains. And then I'm going to give you an example from the Minority Act, the Swedish one, how the rights from the Framework Convention have been transformed into Swedish legislation. And most important, what effect have those rights had on the ground? So let me start by a few words about the Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities. It is one of the most comprehensive international conventions designed to protect the rights of persons belonging to national minorities. It gives these persons' individual rights, individual cultural rights and other rights. And every one of these states which have ratified the convention is monitored by the committee I'm in every 5 years. We write an opinion on each country, and this opinion is followed by a resolution of the Committee of Ministers in the Council of Europe. There, all the foreign ministers of these countries sit. And if you want to go in and check the resolutions, you can follow this link. And as I said, Sami are considered both as an indigenous people and a national minority under the Framework Convention. And the big difference being an indigenous people is that your culture is very closely connected to your traditional lands. And it's not only about traditional use of land, of course, as we heard before, it's about the whole view of life, the holistic view of how man and nature interact with each other and affect each other. So it's very important, both if you are an official in an authority in one of the states within Sápmi, in Russia, in Finland, in Sweden and Norway, or if you are a Sami person, that you know the main principles of this convention, because they tell you how cultural rights should be applied. So the first principle is that states shall promote in all.
И первый принцип заключается в том, что государства обязаны во всех направлениях, особенно в области культурной жизни,
peoples, national minorities, and those belonging to the majority. We all should have the same cultural rights. And we have just discussed funding, and the funding is maybe not the main focus, but the main focus, according to this convention, is the outcome. States have the duty to promote all conditions necessary for Sami to have the same opportunity as persons belonging to the majority to maintain and develop their culture and preserve their identity. So, of course, it's important with funding, but the most important thing, according to this principle, is that the outcome of the measures taken, whether it is funding or whether it is to build up Sami organizations so that they can represent Sami in a good way when it comes to cultural rights, or whether it is to see that they have premises where they can meet or perform. All these things should produce an outcome which gives Sami equal possibilities as persons of the majority to maintain and develop their culture. So the reason why states should promote the conditions necessary for Sami is that there is a past history of discrimination of Sami and Sami culture, and it's still a structural discrimination of minorities, among those the Sami, when it comes to have equal rights, equal cultural rights to the majority. And last but not least, Sami have a right to influence issues which affect them. For example, public decisions concerning culture. And I find this one very important because I'm a person from the Swedish majority. And for a lot of years, I thought that it was my duty to promote Sami culture. But it is not. It's my duty to listen and let Sami influence the decisions I take as an official, so that the conditions necessary for Sami to decide how they want to maintain and promote their culture are made better. So the duty to promote is expressed in Article 5 of the Framework Convention, and it says, there is a duty for the state to promote the conditions necessary for persons belonging to national minorities to maintain and develop their culture and to preserve the essential elements of their identity, namely their religion, language, traditions, and cultural heritage. This is a provision that shows that culture has a very wide interpretation. It talks about identity. And now again, we can think about indigenous culture and Sami culture being so closely knit to traditional lands, not only through reindeer herding, fishing and hunting, but also traditional knowledge and spiritual values. So all these things are protected under Article 5. This means that it is essential that relevant governmental institutions are aware of the needs of persons belonging to national minorities. This is said in the Advisory Committee's second thematic commentary that you can find through this link. And this is so important because, as I mentioned, myself misunderstood the content of creating conditions necessary for Sami to develop their culture. And it is very important that all officials on local, regional, and state level are aware of what Sami culture is and what Sami want the authorities to promote and support. The right to influence is entailed in Article 15 of the Framework Convention, and it is a duty for the state to create the conditions necessary for the effective participation of persons belonging to national minorities in cultural, social, and economic life, and in public affairs, in particular those affecting them. And this is a point where Sweden has been repeatedly criticized, not only by the Council of Europe, but also by the UN. Because this means that it is not sufficient for states to formally provide for the participation of Sami in decision-making. They should also ensure that their participation has a substantial influence on decisions, and that there is, as far as possible, a shared ownership of the decisions taken. So, if you work within an authority, you should see that there is a real outcome of the input that Sami do into the decision-making process, but also that the decision that you take at the end may not be fully what the Sami had wished for, but it should be formulated in a way that Sami feel that they can stand behind it, a shared ownership of the decisions taken. And you can read more about this in the second thematic commentary on the European Council's webpage. Now, the Swedish example on duty to promote and the right to influence is entailed in the Swedish Constitution and the Minority Act. And the Swedish Constitution states that the authorities shall act in the interest of all people so they can participate and achieve equality in society, among other things on ethnic grounds. And the possibility for the Sami people to maintain and develop their own culture and community life shall be promoted. So you recognize this from the convention. And in the Minority Act, there is a similar paragraph. The authorities, and this means at local, regional, and state level, shall promote the national minorities' possibilities to maintain and develop their culture in Sweden. And children's development of a culture identity and the use of their own minority language must be promoted in particular. And then the influence principle is expressed in the next paragraph, paragraph 5. Administrative authorities shall give the national minorities the possibility to influence issues which affect them, and as far as possible consult with the minorities on such issues. They shall consider Sami views and needs in the authorities' decision-making. And note that the duty to give Sami a chance to influence decision is without exception, whereas consultation, whatever difference that is to influence, is not a total obligation, but influence is. So what are the effects of the duty to promote and the right to influence for Sami in Sweden? The government, the Swedish government in 2018 said themselves, overall, it can be noted that most of the country's municipalities and county councils do not take into account the responsibility they have for realizing the basic protection in paragraph 4 and 5, the paragraphs we just read, for the national minorities. This is despite the fact that the Minority Act has been in force for over 8 years. The main reason for this seems to be lack of knowledge about the national minorities and minority languages in Sweden, both historically and today. And I would add a lack of knowledge of what Sami culture is, how broad it is, how closely tied it is to the traditional lands, and a lack of knowledge of the Minority Act and the Framework Convention. So the same year, the Council of Europe, the Committee of Ministers, passed a resolution with 3 recommendations for immediate action to Sweden. And I will read one of them. Increase and formalize opportunities for the Sami to participate in a meaningful and effective way in decision-making processes, affecting them on local, regional, and state level, and ensure that the Sami can maintain and develop their culture whenever decisions are taken that affect areas inhabited traditionally by them. So some progress have been made since then, and I think one of the biggest progress is when the Swedish Supreme Court last year in the Girjas case said, in application of law, where there is a question of weighing different interests against each other, that is usually when Sami interests are put aside. But here the Supreme Court says the Sami's interest in being able to maintain their culture, including reindeer husbandry, should be given special importance. So if you have mining, if you have forestry that counteracts the possibility to go on with reindeer husbandry, the authority who makes the decision should be careful to give the Sami's interest in being able to maintain their culture special importance. Also on regional level, last year, the regions of Norrbotten, Västerbotten, Jämtland, Härjedalen, and Västernorrland started cooperating, supporting Sami culture with the aim to develop their cooperation with the Sami Parliament and other Sami cultural institutions.
King is talking.
Yeah, sorry. So let me just do the conclusions very quickly. I want to remind you, all of you in all of Sápmi, that authorities according to the Framework Convention have a duty to promote conditions necessary for Sami to have equal rights to those of the majority to maintain and develop their culture. Sami in all of Sápmi have a right to influence measures and decisions concerning their culture. And in Sweden, yes, there are some positive signs of these principles being applied, but more is needed. And we keep monitoring, my committee keep monitoring. Norway is being monitored and will be visited by 3 experts from the advisory committee this summer. Sweden's state report is due this year, June 1st, and shadow reports from you, Sami organizations and NGOs in Norway and Sweden are welcome. Send them to us or to me, and I will forward them. And more information about the monitoring also of Finland and Russia you can find on our webpage. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Maria. It is very interesting to get a focus on a European legal instrument, because oftentimes new legal instruments can have a good impact on the legal situation. One of the most famous examples of this is when Reagan, back in the days, cut all the federal funding, which practically meant that a lot of the Native American reservations lost almost all their fundings, and then their lawyers started to read the legal instruments and managed to establish some independent funding by the casino system. So getting new toys, new legal toys, and that you show them and fold them out for us in this way. It is a very important and good contribution to get here.
I know I have talked too much, but I have to mention that in Article 18, there is a very good article saying that states should conclude agreements with neighboring states to make it easier for minorities to cooperate. So I think you should use that for the former session where you talked about cooperation within SAPMI. You could refer to Article 18. So. Yeah,
thank you so much for this this good advice, and we will continue the conversation. I hope and I look forward to that we will do both within this conference and also in the continuance of life. And now I want to invite Elle Merete Omma, who is the head of the EU unit in the Sami Council. And I look very much forward to your presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Let's see if I can share my PowerPoint presentation. Can you see it?
We can see it, but if you put that on, yeah, there you have it on the right mode here.
Okay, thank you so much. So, in the following 15 minutes, I will suggest some solutions to the following challenges. I will argue that the EU has perhaps one of the world's most sophisticated policies on indigenous peoples, but it doesn't apply to the Sami people, as the EU has defined indigenous peoples' rights and issues as a foreign policy issue. The second thing that I will talk about is that the EU has probably the biggest culture budget in the world, which in theory the Sami people can benefit from, but due to lack of capacity and perhaps awareness of the possibilities, we do not get access to the funds. So my name is Elle Merete Omma, and I am the head of the EU unit. And I will spend the following 15 minutes trying to share how the Sami Council is working on these challenges. But before I start, I will talk a little bit about the Sami Council and try to explain what kind of organizations we are. We are a voluntary Sami organization, an NGO, with Sami member organizations in Finland, Russia, Norway, and in Sweden. And since it was founded in 1956, the Sami Council has actively dealt with Sami policies tasks on a variety of level, both international, nationally, and on a regional level. The main task of the Sami Council is the promotion of the Sami rights and interest in the 4 countries that we are living in. And we are trying to consolidate the feeling of unity among the Sami people, to attain recognition for the Sami as one nation, and to maintain the cultural, political, economic, and social rights for the Sami in legislations in the 4 countries. So how do we work on this? Well, first of all, we do have a political leadership that is guided by the Sami conference that is held every 4th year. The next one is hopefully going to take place in October this year in Gällivare in Sweden. And as I mentioned, it will be a member organizations from all 4 countries. And we do have a president, who is Miss Christina Henriksson, who's currently on maternity leave, that guides the political leadership of the organization. And then we have an administration with the headquarters is in Karasjok in Norway, but the cross-border mindset is reflected also in the administration, as we have regional offices in all 4 countries. You have already met Christina Henriksson, who is the head of the culture unit. We have an Arctic and environmental unit, who's mainly working on Arctic Council issues. Then we have a human rights unit working with all types of human rights issues and taking principal cases to the international arenas to protect Sami people's rights. And then we have the EU unit, which I am leading, and it is the newest and youngest unit at the Sami Council, even though that it has been in our strategy documents since the early 90s. But due to lack of funding, we have not been able to operationalize it until in 2018. So that is why I'm saying that after investigating the EU, I claim that the EU has the most sophisticated policies on indigenous peoples in the world. If you just browse through the different resolutions, communications, joint staffed working documents that apply for civil servants working in the EU commissions, you can find that they are very much aware of the indigenous people situations and how they need to work and consolidate in order to protect and support indigenous peoples in the world. The sad part is that it doesn't apply to the Sami people, because the EU has defined the Sami people or indigenous policy area as foreign policies, and therefore it doesn't apply to the internal matters. However, as we heard the previous speakers outline, that there is a legal framework that protect the Sami people. And I will not spend any time on that since she did an excellent presentation. I will just mention that the EU as an institution is based on the respect for cultural and linguistic diversity, and it will work to ensure that the Europe's cultural heritage is safeguarded and enhanced. I would rather spend some time on the policy area, and I will point into 3 main documents that I think you should be aware of. The first one is the EU Arctic policy, and the important part in this communication is that it says that there is a goal of enhancing or advancing consistency between the EU's external and internal policies towards indigenous peoples. There will be an updated policy this year, so stay tuned. The second document that I just want to make reference to is a resolution from the European Parliament from 2018 that also talks about the Sami people. But perhaps the most interesting policy area for this summit is the new agenda for the culture field that was launched in 2018, and it's still applicable. It focuses on culture as a social dimension, as an economic dimension, and external dimension. And how these priorities should be reached is outlined in the work plan for culture that you can read more about. But with reference to the first panel, I would like to say that the budget for the field of culture in Europe, within the framework of EU, is 2 billion euros. And if you compare that to the relatively modest budget numbers that was presented to us by the Sami parliaments, I think there is a potential of leverage the support to the Sami culture field if we are able to partner stronger with the European Union. But as I said in the introduction, we do have challenges of knowing how to navigate within the framework of the EU. Based on that, the Sami Council, together with Suomi Sami Nuoret, applied for an Interreg project called Filling the EU Sapmi Knowledge Gaps. The overall objective of the project is capacity building within Sapmi, empowerment of our own institutions and organizations, and put us in a position where we can actually start thinking more strategically about how our relationship to the EU would look like. The project consists of four main components. The first one is a trainee program. It started in January this year, and the idea is that we will educate our own people on EU issues. The same rationale is behind the training courses that is also an important component of this project. The first training course will take place later this month, and the focus area will be the EU market and how we can benefit from the EU market on our own premises. As I mentioned, it has been important to us to start thinking more strategically about what kind of relationship we want with the EU. So based on that, the project also established an EU Sapmi think tank where we have invited Sami experts to brainstorm and develop a draft strategy that we will present later this year. And the idea is that this strategy document can start the conversation internally in Sapmi to outline how we would like to see our future to be when it comes to relationship with the EU. The fourth component of the program is EU Sami Week. It is planned to be in Brussels in 2022, hopefully, if we are allowed to travel. And the idea of the EU Sami Week is to create a platform where we, the Sami people, can come to decision makers in Brussels and tell our own stories and set the agenda and pose the questions that we want to have on the table. The working title for the Sami Week is Arts and Lands. And we are hoping that that thematic topic is interesting and it could be framed in many ways. And I invite participants in this summit and the organizers to reach out to the Sami Council so we can see how we can take advantage of each other and hammer out a program that is sustainable and useful for the Sami community and society as such. I look forward to any questions, comments, or idea that the audience might have and want to share. And if you don't want to do it in public, please feel free to contact me anytime on any social media platform or email that you prefer. So thank you so much for your attention, and yeah, thank you again.
Thank you so much, Ellen Merete, for this wonderful presentation, and it also shows all the possibilities that are in this perception of the Sami people, also as a European people. For example, the reference of civility that is within the European context versus the global context, and also all the other possibilities that can be within such an approach, so that our people can have the possibility to create an economy that is not based on public funding alone. So there are really some promising approaches to that. And now we are going to move on to the third presentation here, and we will get an approach from one of the artists whom I respect very much, and I'm very proud of the art that Maria Bolnango does. So it's such an honor for me to get to hand the floor over to her. So here you go.
Grito, Ander. So, Borbaby, good day. I want to thank for the opportunity to speak here today. I'm going to talk about ownership in Sami film. My name is Maria Bolnango, and I'm Sami from Ivuambahta, Sápmi, Norway. And I'm a film director who is currently working on my first feature, I Love My Gorohedji. And by being a Sami film director, in opposition to just a director, it actually decreases my chances to get funding for a narrative feature film. To be correct, this is not that being a Sami director seems to be the problem. It is when a Sami director wants to make a Sami narrative feature with mainly Sami content and Sami language that the real problems arise. And this is not a personal view of mine. This is the view you get if you look at facts and statistics. So let's look at them a little bit. We can take a look at Sami film history. The total of narrative feature with mainly Sami content and language directed by Sami directors in the span of the whole Sami film history, which is now over 30 years, it is only 4 Sami features. And that is extremely low, and that number is not talked about as much as it should. So we can ask why? Why is there only 4? Why has there been made so few Sami films by Sami directors? The answer varies depending on who you ask, of course. If you ask, for example, the Norwegian Film Institute, they may answer that they have always granted production money to the project they see fit, the project they see the most potential in. And let's say that's the truth. So why haven't they done anything to lift the potential of Sami and diverse storytellers? And if you ask me, the question has a complex answer. I think it has to do with the Sami history of oppression, how our status has changed over the years, the popularity of our arts, and the systemic racism in all institutions. And how can really Sami film develop if the national institutions don't grant support? And how can Sami films develop if the Sami Film Institute don't have enough grants to support even one Sami narrative feature a year? So it's not so weird that Sami film has not developed as fast as we would have liked it to. And the last Sami narrative feature on the Norwegian side, directed by a Sami, was the Kautokeino Rebellion by Nils Gaup, and that is over 13 years ago. So that's a very long time also. Luckily in 2020, diversity was on the agenda here and all over the world. And the Norwegian Film Institute got criticized for not granting feature film grants to diverse filmmakers and diverse stories. So I guess they felt the heat and they started a diversity reference group in 2020, where they invited one representative from each minority group. So they wanted diversity in ethnicity, indigenous peoples, functionality, sexual orientation, and gender. And they also wanted different film disciplines in this group. So they invited me to this reference group to be the Sami representative. And what also happened in 2020 was that for the first time on the Norwegian side of Sami, a Sami female director got production grants. So it was Elle Sofie Henriksen. She got the first grants in 13 years. And that is great, but it should not be 13 years to the next time. Because if it goes too long between each grant, there is not a Sami film industry. There are only different talents with some films here and there. So Norwegian Film Institute has started positive changes, but the massive turnaround for diversity will take many years before we see the results of it. So me being part of this reference group, I have attended meetings with the Norwegian Film Institute together with the diversity reference group, where we give feedback to the Norwegian Film Institute of the changes they want to make, and we also have suggested changes for them. One of the first topics that came up for this discussion in these meetings was, what is diversity? Because diversity is not only what is in front of the camera, it is what is behind of the camera. Who gets to tell the stories? And I think, and I said it very loud and clearly at those meetings, that Sami stories should be told by Samis. Sami scriptwriters, Sami directors, Sami producers. That Sami stories is our immaterial ownership. And actually, in some countries, they have set policies of inclusion in order to get financing for indigenous stories on film. So they actually have to have indigenous advisors and indigenous key creatives. This we do not have in Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. That means that Sami stories on film can be directed by Norwegians, Swedish people, Finnish people, and Russians. So our lands were colonized, and what it seems now is that our stories are next in line. What does that mean? It means that that we should have policies to set in action to ensure that this should not happen. And you ask why? Why shouldn't Sami stories be directed by a non-Sami? Why is this so important? Why is it important that Sami stories are told by Samis? It is our stories. It means our stories are not yours to be taken. Our stories are not yours to be told. That is the short answer. But why, you ask? Why? To say it kind of shortly, they, as the non-Samis, will never be able to tell our stories the way we have experienced them. And by that, they can rewrite our Sami indigenous stories through a colonized perspective. In other words, falsification of history. It is actually that dramatic, a falsification of history. Let those words sink in. So if a non-Sami director will direct a film about Samis, a Sami story, they maybe get some things right. Maybe they get the language right, they cast Sami actors, but they will always have their non-Sami lens on. They can't take it off, even if they wanted to. And by that, they will actually rewrite history, portray a story is from a Sami perspective, but they can try to do it, but it will always come from a colonized one. If it's a historical piece, they will reinforce their colonized perspective. Maybe it will not be obvious, but it will be there. They will yet again rewrite Sami history. And now in such a strong medium as film, because film is such an emotional, captivating medium. And if it's a piece of current times, they will still rewrite our history. A non-Sami can never live our experience. They have never grown up with the harsh realities of racism, colonization, fighting for our rights, and they will never grow up with the beauty of our culture, life, language, and traditions. They will never be able to tell our stories with all the right nuances. And why would they even try, you ask? Well, because this falsification of history will reach millions of people, audience, and also earn millions of NOK, SEK, euros, and dollars. So it's money. Let's talk about it. It's a film industry is an industry with a lot of money involved. And as the Sami and indigenous stories become more popular, both among audience, but also among critically acclaimed festivals, we have seen it happen here in Sápmi too. After the feature film Sami Blood, it was highly regarded by festivals and critics. Sami stories also became more popular. And this has made non-Sami film companies see their possibility to capitalize on our stories. And in Canada, the TV and Film Commission has set policies in place to make sure that this doesn't happen. If you want to produce an indigenous story on film in Canada and get the grants from that commission, the majority of the ownership has to be within the indigenous community. 51% of the ownership has to lie with the indigenous producer or the director. And this is to ensure that Canadian producers are not telling these stories just to capitalize on the stories. And as I worked on my first feature, I Love My Vuorohetki, I want to change the structure of producing. I want the majority of ownership of our film to lie within our people. The ownership of Sami stories, all indigenous stories should and shall be with us, both the immaterial and material ownership. So I want to end this speech by request that the National Film Institutes of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia to set such policies to ensure that both the majority of the immaterial and material ownership lies within the Sami people. Thank you. Gitu, that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Maria Bolnango, for this very important contribution, because one of the Sami experiences through history has been that that we haven't organized our lives around the concept of ownership, and therefore we are at this moment in very big trouble when it comes to the rights to land and different other cultural rights, and this this also applies to ownership to stories. What should our relationship to the stories be, and what should the implication of this ownership relation be? Those questions are very important questions, and they bring us to this moment. They bring us back to history, but they also bring us into the future, because similar questions will appear. For example, when new medias like computer game plots that are depicted will start to actualize also from a Sami perspective, because the Sami culture has so much contrast and colors and drama that easily can be exploited in this new types of economies that are appearing. So these are very, very important approaches to point out. We are. I want to address a question to Ellen Merete. Omma, if you can turn on your camera, and I wanted you to elaborate a little bit more of the rationale of the European focus of the Sami Council, because it sounded very promising and sort of gives ground to optimism to flourish.
Well, I hope it does, and I hope that the Summit Council has realized that Europe is there anyway, and the European Union is there, and they have a legal and they have a political obligations towards the Sami people, and we have when we have reached out to the European Union, we have learned that they are more positive, they're more open to think about cross-border collaboration also in Sápmi, because that is the way they think about regional cooperation, and it's easier to get understanding for the needs that we have in Sápmi in Brussels compared to perhaps the Nordic states. So in terms of that is certainly a positive feedback that we have received, but at the same time, there are challenges that we need to sort out. But at least on the culture field, I think there's lots of opportunities, both budget-wise, but also policy-wise, and also on a legal basis.
Okay, time. We are, as humans, we are born into the dictatorship of time. So, and now we are going to have the two most important parts of our program. The most important part is that we are going to screen this very good film Nyokchamat that our previous presenter Maria Bol Nango has directed, and this is a film that is so important because it has so much of artistic braveness and also have reached the different screens that it was important to reach, and have had a lot of very important recognition. So enjoy the film. That is the most important part of the seminar. And then after that, then comes the next most important part of the seminar, which is the lunch.
Now we are going into the last session for today. So I will soon leave the word over to our moderator, Ante Sompi, who is the moderator, but also the ruler of the third session called SOS, First Aid Art Kit, the Sápmi case of Sweden. And I also will send an extra hello to our Russian friends who are listening to translation from English to Russian at this simultaneously as we are doing this summit. I forgot to tell before, so I'm glad I
забыл сказать сразу, что я очень рад, что вы с нами. Поэтому, итак, Анде,
take over.
Hello, hello. I got the message that the video has been turned off on my. I can't start my video because the host has stopped it. So we have to use my voice here. But I'm very happy to invite to the floor the network, our hosts.
Ja, det är på engelska för den är internationell.
Yes, here I am.
Den här gubben som pratar nu, men han...
Back again. My name is Ante Sompi, and I'm leading this part of the conversation. We are going to focus on...
Мы поговорим, так сказать, о комплекте для первой помощи и приведем пример из Швеции. И главный вопрос, как мы можем
to get the Sami cultural situation in Sweden to accelerate like a Porsche from 0 to 100 kilometers per second. That is the underlying question that we are looking at. And our hosts have promised to help us with a series of interventions. And I'm so happy to introduce the first speaker on the list, my longtime good friend, Åsa Simma. I'm so happy to see you, and I'm so proud to introduce you. The floor is yours. Åsa, you have to turn on the sound.
I did. No, does it work now?
Now
Yes.
now we are. Yeah.
It's just sending you a Saladeva Gishto Ante. As I understand the Sami philosophical worldview, our entire cultural expression is based on occurrences and observances of nature. For instance, that which is different in nature
is of higher value than the ordinary. Trees, stones, mountains with a special shape has been touched by creation with another hand than that which is ordinary. Even children with disabilities were observed as special. Our gods, spirits, loved them so much, so they kept a part of their soul in the spirit realm, making them seem not complete in our ordinary world. With this in mind, I really do understand why our Sami culture encourages us to pay attention when important decisions are made. What we decide must last for 7 generations. That is long-term thinking. And every generation is the 7th generation in respect for those that did the decisions back then. Now, the past century, we have constantly had to argue and explain our existence, argue for our rights, right to be the human and culture that we are. This argumentative actuality has changed our way of being and thinking. We have had to remove ourselves from the accepting, tolerant thinking.
Мы ушли от созерцательного, такого толерантного отношения и даже стали несколько агрессивными. Нам нужно
own original methods of existence to survive as a people, to be able to grasp what creation really meant to be. For long-term existence, our elders, the carriers of traditional knowledge, has to be incorporated in all the cultural efforts we make. Long-term thinking requires that we ourselves create our guidelines, that we organize ourselves in our own cultural way. Now, our natural resources are turning into pocket change in the hands of the greedy. Nothing is left for us to repair the damages that we have been forced into. So give us the place and resources to flourish so that our people can develop and work within our culture. I am pretty sure that many wounds will heal that way. Give us the opportunity to encompass a long-lasting worldview. The entire world will benefit from that. Thank you. And I also promised that I was gonna introduce the next speaker. It's Inge Frisk from Stockholm Sami Association. It's a very important organization for my theater and other artists because they organize all our performances when we are performing in the capital of Sweden, Stockholm. Inge Lägerborre.
Thank you, Åsa, for the nice words on our efforts to cooperate with you. In Stockholm Sami Association, we firmly believe that the Stockholmers, they deserve more access to Sami culture. And Samis in Stockholm, they deserve better access and development of their culture and languages. To fulfill these needs this year, we plan the following public events this summer and the autumn. Participation in the Europride parade, several lectures, 3 dance performances with 2 dance companies, regular screening of indigenous films over internet and the film festival. And of course, the visit by Giron Sami Theater, which will happen in December. And also late in November, we will produce the recurring event Sami Evening, Samisk Afton, in cooperation with the Stockholm-based Sami folk music group Golmök. For our members, we will offer the following: 4 handicraft doji trainings, sessions, regular doji cafes, regular cafes for the elderly, a language immersion bath, a language study circle, and a language cafe. To fund this year's effort, we have submitted more than 40 project grant applications. Yes, you heard right, 40 applications. This is insane. And the reason is that for each project, we need to apply at several grant providers. That is in order to secure the finances that we need for each of these projects. We badly need a fully funded Sami Cultural Center in Stockholm. This in order to fulfill the needs of both Swedes and the Sami. The Sami Cultural Center would promote and develop Sami culture in the region. We know the needs and we can do more with the right staffing and cooperation. Our contribution in the direction toward the Sami Cultural Center is that we have sought and have been granted funding for a pre-study from the City of Stockholm and the Stockholm Regional Board. So we will work closely with Vermi K here in this connection to combine our resources and efforts into a proposal and development plan effective for the Sami people and the Stockholm region. And now over to Niklas at SOCI, the Umeå Sami Association, and they do a great work there in the Sami Week that has been of a great importance to me personally. So over to you, Niklas.
Thank you, Inge. The Sami are an indigenous people. This is recognized by the Swedish state, but it seems that these are mostly empty words when it comes to facilitating for the Sami organizations within Sweden. We are on a continuous basis treated as any minority group. Instead, this is a flaw. Swedish government and public institutions must acknowledge this fact. Sami organizations and institutions are underfunded. This creates little predictability and stability for maintenance and development, and few possibilities for our own competence building. The lack of resources hugely affects the works we are set out to do. A common denominator within Swedish Sápmi is that Sami culture workers are project workers. If you have ambitions to maintain a Sami organization, then it is only through voluntary commitment this can be achieved in the long term. A Sami culture worker must often compromise in quality and quantity due to low funding. This is a compromise with the Sami culture and its value. We must bargain with artists and musicians to a below level standard. It's demeaning, but most of all, not sustainable for the Sami people who has dedicated their life to expressing Sami culture and art forms. To my knowledge, there are no schools that have Sami as their main teaching language in Sweden. We are still only taught in Sami. How can this be taken for granted in Swedish educational institutions on the same time not apply for the Sami? Well, there are double standards concerning Swedish and Sami society. Swedish society has a serious lack of knowledge concerning its own indigenous people. This makes us conduct popular adult education to fill gaps instead of culture work. Some organizations are doing the work. Sami organizations are doing the work of Swedish public institutions while lacking resources for their baseline. This is unacceptable. I was told to give a concrete suggestion. Well, proper funding of some institutions in Sápmi. These are maybe harsh, but these are honest words about the situation and the cultural frameworks in Sápmi. Maybe I did not see it myself in the right spot today concerning what was supposed content of this speech, but I took this liberty when Sami culture is designated a backseat of the bus. Thank you. The next speaker will be Lea Simma from Kärlegården.
Thank you, Niklas. In the 80s, the famous North Sami singer Mari Boine sang, "We watch TV every day, but barely hear a word in our own language." The legal landscape has changed a lot since the past 30 years, and today there are several laws that in theory should strengthen our rights to our language and the access to it. But despite the legal jargon, I wouldn't say that the actual situation on the ground has improved a lot outside of our homes since the 80s. The laws call for policy documents to be translated into Sami. We hear news in Sami. and students are offered Sami lessons these days, sure. But apart from that, our languages lack a presence in public out with the arts. I would even go as far as to say that without our languages, we wouldn't have any Sami art to speak of. Our languages contain our knowledge, our history, where we come from, who we are as a people, what our values are. Our languages give us the framework we need in order to connect to and communicate with each other and lands that shaped us. The heart of our culture is language. Our languages are our medicine. They hold all the keys to our culture, our memories. It's all stored in our body, our stories, and the way we see the world. The art and culture scene is a public space where we can allow our languages to be playful, expressive, and outspoken, singing and ringing with all the tones it possesses. Speaking to our hearts and bodies, where our DNA still remembers what it was like to be immersed in the sound of our ancestors' melody and rhythm. The culture scene is where we can play with our language, dream in our language, explore new possibilities and realities that is not connected to the home sphere or the classroom's grammar lessons. Consequently, it is necessary to give our languages a place and space in books, libraries, songs, and films, on stages, in theaters, and at gathering places. The arts ought to be an arena where our languages can be allowed to make up a natural part of the air we breathe. Indeed, our languages need safe spaces to exist, rest, and simply be. Siri Brock Johansen once wrote that language is the heart of our community. Without language, we die. If we want a strong culture, we need our languages. Kiitos. And then I will give the word to Jerker Bexelius at the South Sami Center Galtje in Stare. Over to you.
Kiitos. Thanks. Buribieje. Sami society and culture have a history of living under regulations, limitations, and restrictions. There were times when our drums were being burnt. There were times when our joys were suppressed and our language forbidden. There were times when all decisions regarding Sami society and culture could not be influenced by us, the people possessing the knowledge and affected by the decisions. These were colonial times. Some say this is past time, long forgotten. But is it really? Many or all Sami cultural organizations still bear witness to how running their businesses is out of their hands, relying on the political decisions and goodwill of the Swedish state. The support was too limited in 1993. In 2021, it still is. The other day, claiming it is for the good of cultural integration, one of Sweden's biggest political parties even suggested the full abolishment of financial support for ethnic organizations. There are positive signs, though. Within the Sami society, the process of decolonization has since long been very active. We need to continue making our voices heard so that we can develop our culture with highest esteem for our own traditions and visions. Gone are many of the legislative restrictions and societal limitations. We can now see how measures to a greater extent involving Sami perspectives actually are put in place. We can see Sami organizations developing and development projects being started all over Sápmi. With great promise and expectation, we witness the initiative of the 4 northern regions to unite in developing the prerequisites for Sami culture. We also have high hopes for the Truth Commission to finally get rid of historical malpractices. To some extent, one could say that also the Swedish society has begun its process of decolonization. But we need you to further develop and engage in our common decolonization process. We need you to truly acknowledge us as the indigenous people of our common region. We need you to show respect for our needs and the idea of a decolonized cultural playground. We need you to know and acknowledge the national and international supporting principles, such as FPIC, applicable and important also within the area of Sami culture development. We need you to further acknowledge Sami society and organizations as the true owners of and speaking partners for Sami culture development. It's time for you to establish the adequate, equal, and full conditions in terms of strategy, structure, and financing, and consequently true Sami decision-making powers for the good of diversity and a bright future for Sami culture. Kehto. I'll pass the word to Oskar Östergren from the Alias.
Kehto Jerker. Yes, my name Oskar Östergren Jaita, and I represent Alias. That's the new institution here in Derna. Alias is created for the Sami people and by the Sami people, and it comes from long-standing needs from both locally and in Sápmi in general. Together with the organizations you just heard talk, we make out the network Viermi.k, and we take the matters in our own hands. Because developing Sami cultural infrastructure, it demands Sami leaderships, it requires Sami leaderships, as well as control over the narratives and the gatekeeping, which also includes the concept of quality. In today's Sweden, it is the majority society's interpretive precedence that prevails. We want a new order where our indigenous knowledge and expertise truly gets the respect it deserves in our own cultural environment, because we know what needs to be done. You have to trust us on that. In Viermi.k, we do this work by ourselves, by rolling up our sleeves, not sitting and waiting. The members of the network have created Sami cultural nodes where we have Sami leadership and control, and we work together to create tolerable conditions for further work. We know what we want. We want to use our knowledge to take responsibility, to create opportunities to develop Sápmi. We also know what we don't want, and that is to continue with the present system where the Sami indigenous culture is put alongside other minorities drowning in reference groups. Just last week, the network Viermi.k actively offered our combined expertise to the government study about how to restart the cultural field after the pandemic. But the answer was no thanks. We will talk to the minority reference groups in the Cultural Council. But creating something new requires that the old must change. Some parts must be given up by the major society in favor for the new. We can call it indigenize or decolonize, but you can't decolonize without actually giving something up, without it hurting a little. Kehto, I'm the last one in the Viermi.k session, so it's back to you, Ante, I suppose.
Thank you so much, and I am so proud. You have been right on time, each of you. So that was very good, and it was also very enlightening to listen to each of you, how eloquently you address the challenges, and how eloquently you also point out the directions that we could go to. And now I have the great pleasure to introduce Karin Thomasson, the regional consular president of the Swedish National Touring Theatre, and also the spokesperson for the 4 northern regions in Sweden. So, Karin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ande. And first of all, I want to thank the representatives from Viermi.k for interesting presentations. I represent the political level of the 4 regions in the north of Sweden: Jämtland Härjedalen, Västernorrland, Västerbotten, Norrbotten, and our network Kultur i Norr. The 4 of us have a habit of working together in many political fields, and 2 years ago, we decided to formalize our work with cultural politics. We decided to write a position paper to confirm our ambitions and engagements in 3 different cultural domains. One of them is Sami culture. The position paper was signed last year at the National Cultural Conference Folk och Kultur and serves as a good example of regional cooperation. Since our 4 regions are situated within Sápmi, we considered Sami culture a natural priority. The 4 regions are also administrative district for Sami, which means that we have a special responsibility to provide service in Sami language, education, elderly care, and of course also a special responsibility towards Sami cultural institutions and Sami artists. The Sami cultural heritage is an important part of the cultural expression in North Sweden. To strengthen the cultural identity for Sami people through the possibility to take part of their own culture will be priority. To raise the level of awareness and knowledge about Sami people, both past and present, is important for our democracy and cultural diversity. We identified 3 main parts where we will take action. Number 1, develop cooperation with the Sami Parliament and other Sami cultural institutions. We are convinced that cooperation is the way to go to maximize our resources. The regions work within the system of Kultursamverkansmodellen with regional and national funding. The Sami Parliament works mainly with national funding. Where the Sami society has the knowledge, the regions may have the means, and together we can reach further. A good example is the agreement between Värmekå and the 4 regions. Number 2, on different levels work for Sami scenes and Sami centers. There are today a number of Sami scenes and Sami centers, for example, Aite, Giron, Ailes, Galtje, and others. But Sápmi is geographical a large territory, which also includes Norway, Finland, and Russia, and not to forget, several languages. We are convinced that Sami cultural institutions are of great importance, not only to the Sami society, but also to the majority society. We want to support the establishment of Sami scenes and centers, both on local, regional, and national level. That means that when you, Värmekå, for example, are working to establish Giron as a national scene for Sami theater, or a new museum in the South Sápmi area, you have the support of the 4 regions together and not only your mother region. Number 3, support Sami culture in general. That could be, for example, purchasing art from Sami artists, include Sami music and theater in the regional repertoire, support local Sami organizations, etc. Since the Sami cultural landscape moves without regional or national borders, our aim is to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karin. It is very important because one of the things that life has given us is that we belong to different groups, and then our groups have to coexist in the best possible way. The African philosopher Kwame Anthony Appiah, in his wonderful book Cosmopolitism, that is published in 2006, gives the lowest standard of how one can coexist. He says that we don't have to love each other, but we have to get used to each other and exist on the basis of that premise. And these practical initiatives that you are outlining, they sound good. So thank you so much. And now I'm introducing the Sami minister of Sweden, our wonderful neighboring country, Amanda Lin. I see that you haven't put your video on, but I see that your microphone is on. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ande. I think that my video is on, and I hope that soon you will be able to see me too. But I start. Dear friends, thank you very much for inviting me to be here today, and also thank you for your previous interventions and the strong introduction by Giron Samiteater. I would like to extend my warm thanks to the organizers and all participants that we are able to meet in this way. And I'm especially glad to greet representatives from Russia in today's summit. I think it is rewarding if your experiences
Это здорово. Хорошо, если вы можете делиться с нами своим опытом личный.
Dialogue and cooperation, and I believe in particular in this context. So, as minister responsible for both cultural policy and Sami affairs, I think it is incredibly important and rewarding to be able to take part in this discussion on different future issues. And there is an enormous power in the Sami culture, in all its expressions. Interest in Sami culture is strong. It is growing, both here in Sweden, in the Nordic region, and also across the globe. And this is very gratifying. And listening to you here today is important to me, and I welcome your comments and ideas about how the work can progress going forward, because we have to go forward. The Swedish constitution establishes that the Sami people's opportunities to preserve and develop their own cultural and social life must be promoted. And the government and other public actors do this many different ways. This involves the majority of ministers in the government. And it is important that we all assume our responsibility, the central government, the regions, and of course the municipalities. And yes, everyone in our society can contribute. Dialogue with the Sami parliament is central to the government's work, and I'm very keen to maintain our good dialogue. Several important processes in Sami policy are in progress, and I want to mention some of those. First, the upcoming Truth Commission in particular. The Commission is central to examining implemented policies and, of course, their consequences. The Commission will shed light on painful images, painful accounts, but also, I believe, contribute positively to highlighting the Sami culture, history, and way of life. And my hope is that the Commission's outreach activities will also promote knowledge about how Sami people across society and thereby improve the long-term possibilities for Sami culture throughout the whole Sweden. I also want to highlight the Nordic Sami Convention, which I hope Sweden, Norway, and Finland will be able to sign this year and ratify the next year. The Nordic Sami Convention is breaking new ground. It is clear and forceful in all policy areas, including culture. And the convention is, as you know, not legally binding, but it is in no doubt compelling, and it reinforces Sami self-determination. The Sami people's influence will also be strengthened by the Consultation Act that is now awaiting the government, the parliament's, the Riksdag's attention. The Consultation Act and the Nordic Sami Convention are the result of many years of close cooperation with the Sami Parliament and also other stakeholders in the Sami society, and they provide a strong foundation for the future. This is important processes. Now, culture and language are closely intertwined, as you all know. Language is a part of us, it's a part of our culture identity. And for this reason, it is important that languages are preserved, used, and also developed. The stronger legislation protecting minorities that entered into force in January 2019 was an important step for linguistic rights. It strengthened the right to preschool and care of older people in minority languages, allowing the time spent using minority languages can increase. And use of a minority language not only requires the existence of such rights, but also that the language is alive. It is essential that an individual both have the courage, the desire to speak the language. And it is equally important that the society as a whole is open and accepting. The government has referred to the Sami Parliament's report on development of a Sami language center to promote more Sami languages, as well as the Sami Parliament's proposal of an action program to preserve and revitalize the Sami languages. Government proposals are now being prepared, and it is in this area, it is my strongly opinion that we have to do more. The government has advanced the positions for the national minorities and the indigenous people within culture policy. This includes the remit the National Library of Sweden and the Sami Parliament are working on right now to strengthen national minority libraries. In addition, the Swedish Arts Council will make proposals to us on how we can further develop conditions for the culture of the Sami people and other national minorities. And this is something that I will discuss with the Sami Parliament when we get together next week, also more in detail. As minister, I'm also responsible for the government's media policy. Public service broadcasting is doing extraordinarily important work for minority rights and making them visible to the wider public and for the survival and revitalization of minority languages. And the new broadcasting licenses for the period 2020 to 2025 require more new programming in national minority languages. In other words, a greater proportion that is newly produced or newly purchased. When the pandemic briefly eased its grip on Stockholm last autumn, I had the strong pleasure to attending the fantastic production of Ednan live at Orion Teatern. And like everyone else, I was captivated. The story is painful, but in the foreground were the beautiful, unique, and strong elements of the Sami culture, the breadth of which I was also able to experience at the contemporary art exhibition Bakom hörnet vindens jojk, around the corner, the jojk of the wind, which I had the honor of both attending and inaugurating at Sven Harrys Konstmuseum in Stockholm. I know, of course, that the way forward will not always be easy and straight, but I feel very hopeful and I am very determined. And I look forward to continued collaboration with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It is so great to get an overview over both political programs that are in process and also the visions of the government. So it's very fruitful for the seminar here. So now we are going to have a brief dialogue here with questions and answers. And Amanda, you can remain on the video, and I hope that I soon get Karin to turn on her video and that I get Leah and also Oscar to turn on their videos. And I have how could we use a little question and answer session here? And I thought that I would ask each of you 2 questions. The one question is, what are your dreams on this field? like what is dreamable? And then the second question would be, what is doable? What could we do? And I guess I would start with Oscar here, that you answer these two questions to me.
Keito, Ante. Yes, I will try to be very brief so we can have discussions, also a dialogue. Thank you to Karin and firstly to Karin and Amanda, and both of you are invited to Elias and Erna whenever you have time after the pandemic. I would say that the dream would be a joint Sami cultural field over at least the Nordic countries, that we can have possibility to have the same opportunities and actually real opportunities to grow as a people, to be able to, I mean, you need, in culture and art, you need to be at the foreground, you need to be able to actually experiment and do wrong and do things over again and succeed and fail and everything like that. And for that, I think we need equality over in the Sami region, so we can have one, maybe even Sami culture minister for the whole region, and that would of course be a Sami person. The doable is to actually see that this networks, organizations, institutions can live on without in a sustainable way, to have funding so we can do and grow as we want. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Oscar, for that. And then I'll pass the question to Karin Thomasson.
Thank you very much. Well, my dream is a little bit similar to Oscar's. As I finished my speech, I said that the Sami cultural landscape moves without regional and national borders. And I would really like it to be easy to work also from a regional point of view over the regional borders and over the national borders. So that is a dream, and I don't know what we have to do is change some laws or something, but I think that the Nordic countries, and including Russia also in this, we have to make an effort to make this happen. And I reacted very strongly in the morning when we saw the difference between how Norway and Sweden and Sami artists in Norway, Sweden and Finland, how different the possibilities are to perform and to work with arts due to funding. So that is my dream. And what is doable? I would like to have some Sami representatives closely to the Swedish Arts Council, and I would like to have a Sami Parliament, a representative from the Sami Parliament, which is an authority with the responsibility for arts, that they also take part in this Samverkansrådet that is a part of the Swedish Arts Council. You who know what I'm talking about know what I'm talking about, but it's a question of representation, Sami cultural representation on a national level. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karin. It's very stimulating to listen to these observations, and then I'll pass the question to Lea Simma.
Well, my dreamable action would be that we could build up systems in Sápmi where we get so we can educate Sami professionals in culture field, in every field, on every level. that speak Sami. That would be my dream. And my doable dream is a doable dream. My doable action is for us to stop being afraid. When we say that we Sami, our stories belong to us, it's our job to promote our own culture. It doesn't mean that we can carry the burden ourselves, as we heard from the Sami parliament in Norway. Listen to us, we can have a dialogue, talk to us, get to know us. You don't have to guess what we need in Sápmi. We're here, we can talk. So you can live up to the legal frameworks that already exist. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Amanda, then I ask you the same two questions. What is dreamable and what is doable?
Thank you. Dreamable. I can say that my vision, I think it has three different parts. The first is a strong and flourishing Sami cultural life, and a cultural life that is both broad and also that has its unquestionable position within the whole Sápmi, and also in the rest of the countries that belongs to Sápmi, the whole countries. And the other part is that I think that my dream is that we have a greater knowledge and also curiosity from the non-Sami population, an interest of taking part of Sami culture. And the third thing, I think that is perhaps the most important, that the Sami people themselves really experience that they have the best conditions for a dynamic cultural life, that all these three parts are working together. Then I think we can we have a really good goal to work to. And if I were to say something that is more doable, I believe that we are in that phase right now. We are doing lots of things, both from the political side and of course from the Sami side, to take steps towards this this vision and goals. We have, for example, some things that I mentioned was the Truth Commission, the increased funding for the national minority libraries. We have the law of consultation that we are working on. And we have also several steps regarding revitalization of languages that are on the table right now, that we are working on from the parliament side, from the government side. So I think we have a lot of things to continue to work with and to take further steps.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And now I open the floor for the four of you to comment each other's interventions here. So then you can use the hand here. I see Oscar is moving his hand. So the floor is yours, Oscar.
Yeah, thank you. I will try to be quick on the trigger there. I would have a question to Amanda that is about the knowledge and about interest from this major society, because why we say from Viermiko that we need a new Sami strong cultural infrastructure, that comes from that the system we have now, it doesn't work for us, and that when we say we want to build institutions, they need to be Sami institutions, from the base to the ethic, from the idea to the philosophy, because we look at culture and culture expressions differently, and we prioritize differently. We have different methodology how to measure success, for instance. So how much do you gain knowledge about the actual difference and what the institutions need to be able to be Sami? That's my questions for Amanda.
Do you want me to answer now?
Yeah, you're welcome to answer now.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I mean, this is a very broad question, but it is important. And this is something that I have discussed with the Sami Parliament. We have our regular meetings. Like I mentioned in my speech, I'm going to meet with both the Sami Parliament, but also the Sami cultural politics next week. And then we go through different parts of the cultural field. I have also, of course, seen and noticed the wishings of increased financing also from about different parts of the cultural sector. I think from my perspective, it is important both to continue to work, as you say, to strengthen the Sami, the infrastructure from Sami culture. I think it is important. Of course, it's also come to negotiations between different parties in the parliament. But I belong to a party that think it's really important to strengthen the Sami culture in itself. I also think it is important that the Swedish Arts Council, for example, the Swedish different culture organizations, and also on regional level, on the municipality level, also has its own work, so that the Sami culture can be both in its own force, but also has these tentacles over the whole Sweden. I think that will make it strengthen from different perspectives. I don't know if that was a good answer, but it's a short answer. Then, I mean, different part of the culture field has its own problems and possibilities, of course.
Thank you so much. The god that rules over us is Kronos, the god of time. And we have now concluded this session here. I'm very grateful for all the contributions that each of you has given to us now. So we will then continue to the next session immediately, which is the remarks and questions and answers, and that will be a kind of summing up from myself and Mikael Lindblad here. And we have, Mikael and me, we have agreed that I start this off. I think our seminar has been very stimulating, and I think that we have like two different starting points. The one starting point is that a lot of the Sami culture is pretty scattered, that we have a lot of languages very red listed, and we have skeletons that are displaced, and we have land rights that are very much in question. And none of us have a responsibility for that very situation. We have, as we humans do, we have inherited that from our ancestors. But what we can do is that we can try to clear up the mess. It has been a huge party, and we have inherited the mess. And there are like two things that two main challenges. One is that we have to deal with a pretty traumatized culture. There is a lot of trauma, a lot of pain, a lot of painful stories, a lot of painful processes going on. We need to stop them. We need to encourage the people, bring back the joy, and Amanda, as you said, the goal of the flourishing Sami culture is one thing that we all should point towards. And the other big challenge is that we, on the other hand, have a very ignorant population. The Swedish population has not learned almost anything in the schools through the schooling system about Sami culture. So they are very estranged from the Sami culture. So so then all of the information about Sami history, the significance of Sami culture, how language is not only a communicative system but also a perceptual system. All these things are very, very challenging. So so in that respect, the Swedish population information has been omitted from them. So they are living in ignorance, and that is a human rights problem for the Swedish people, that they became so ignorant about the Sami culture. And that was also a result of some conscious decisions that were made. So we need to clean up that mess. So we have two sets of messy situations that we who live in our time has to have a goal, that we try to launch processes so that we can clean them up as best as we can. And then one of the things is that how we could translate that into practical actions. And I think that, Mikael, you can take over from that point.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for all your contribution in this session, the Sápmi case of Sweden. And I would address, if I have the possibility, that Amanda, you are still there. I just want to hear your understanding and thinking about the differences when we're speaking of the cultural sector, the Sami cultural sector in Sweden, Finland, and Norway. How they are so, there are such a big difference between these countries. How do you think about that? That Norway has almost 8 times more money, and Finland has a quarter of what we have in Sweden. Do you ever discuss this over the borders here between the nations?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I mean, I meet with my Sami minister colleagues and also with my cultural minister colleagues. And in my perspective, I think we have to see it as a challenge in Sweden, as something we can work to as a goal that we can work to also achieve, to strengthen our financing when it comes to Sami culture. At least that is something that is natural for me to work for. Regarding the history of it, perhaps I'm not the expert of that, but I believe that when we have the Nordic Sami Convention, as I mentioned, we have a cooperation between our countries. The Nordic Council of Ministers has also initiated a campaign to support natural minority languages in the Nordic region. I think that if we can work together more and exchange experiences more between the countries in Sápmi, then we can strengthen the whole work in Sápmi, and that will be in gain for all of us.
Thank you for that. And I want to ask, pick up something that Karin mentioned that was doable, that Sami competence, I would say, or you could say Sami representatives could be closer to the power, so to speak, in the, for instance, the Arts Council or other important authorities that have a bunch of money. And I think that's a big problem for us, that we are not close to the center or the power, and that means the money. I would really like to such an idea come through. Is it doable? If you, Amanda and Karin, could you comment on that?
Yeah, perhaps I can start. Now we have representatives from Swedish authorities in this meeting, so that is perhaps one good start to strengthen the cooperation between Sami culture actors and, for example, the Swedish Arts Council and the Swedish Culture Board. But I also will say that I have a lot of dialogue with the Sami people, and I know that my minister colleagues also has it, but it has to come down to the working level. And therefore, I'm very positive. I read that the region where Karin Thomasson live have started a work to take a policy about the Sami rights and Sami perspectives. I think that will be good if the regions also work with this, because the regions in both in northern Sweden, but also in Stockholm and other places, are an important factor when it comes to the culture, the money to the culture field. I would also like to mention the work with the Corona, the COVID money, the crisis money. Then I think we have a good cooperation, and I'm very proud that the Sami Parliament has taken a part in handling crisis money towards the Sami culture field. I think that is an important way of also strengthening the cooperation between different parts of the culture world in Sweden.
Yes, thank you. And Karin, could you say a little bit more about your doable action plan?
Yes, I can, because as a regional politician, I was in a meeting maybe 1.5 years ago with the regional cultural politicians and the members from the government and the Department of Culture, and they were talking. There was a lot of talk about national minorities and all kinds of things, but there was no one sitting around the table making the decisions that actually was from the national minority or the Sami people. So I asked about that, and I got some answers. Yeah, but we take that in consideration, and we are talking to them. And I got really angry because when we are talking about, for example, gender equality, it's very important that also women sit at the table where the decisions are taken. So I see the same here. We have to have Sami people sitting around the tables where the money are distributed, where the decisions are taken about who is going to get the grant or not. And I have met some people that we heard in the morning that artists are not sure how they can apply for money from the Arts Council. They turn to the Sami Parliament. The Sami Parliament doesn't have money enough. But because you don't feel at home in the Swedish Arts Council spider web of how to reach, to write application and get funding. So I think that is something very important. I don't know if it made any sense what I said, but I think representation is so important. You have to have people sitting around tables where the decisions are made. So that was my point. Thank you.
Thank you, Karin. I think that's very important, and that's what we are trying to do right now, talking with you, getting closer to the power in this way, in the digital way. That's and it's working very well. I don't know if you have a schedule to follow, Amanda, but I tried to ask one more question. When we opened this summit this morning, I had a welcoming speech, and I I told the audience that from my point of view, and it's in line with Vermiko, the network, that the Sami cultural field would need like 60 millions instead of the not fully 20 today, and doubling the institution, so we could reach at least 15 compared to Norway, who has 60, so to speak. So do you have, when I speak about this dream, can you see it happen ever?
First, I think it's good to have dreams. I think it's important to have dreams and visions, both when it comes to practice and when it comes to money, because money is a way of making it happen, of course. Like I said earlier, I mean, when it comes to the budget, it's always a thing about the negotiations. You all know about that. And therefore, I think it's important that there are meetings like this, that the Sami voices are making themselves heard in the public debate. When it comes to culture now, the culture sector in general, now we have, because of Corona and COVID-19, a really tough situation. I know that this is a thing both for Sami artists, the Sami cultural field, and in whole Sweden. So I used to say that we have to have endurance. We have to realize that this will take years to come back, but we also have to aim higher. We have to aim that we build back the culture field better in Sweden. And we have this, Linda Zachrisson is leading now working to gather ideas of how the culture field can build back better after Corona. And I know she will going to have meeting with the Sami Parliament and the Sami culture sector to include that in this strategy. And this is important because then we can have a debate not only between ministers and politicians that already are engaged in these questions, but also within all of the parties. And I think that is important. And I think it's, like I said, it's important to set goals, visions, and we will continue to have a dialogue, of course.
Thank you very much. But for your knowledge, I'm voluntarily following you to the Department of Finance when you should talk about these matters. I really do. I will go all the way to Stockholm to do it. So you have my word on that. Now you have been in the Shadowlands for a short while. Do you have any comments, questions, or ideas to put forward?
I think that it was, I heard about Rank Xerox, that they had something that they called the playground.
Так как в компании Xerox было нечто, что называлось, как говорится, игровая площадка, когда у вас есть
then you can get funding to that. And I think that what if we had this we organized a kind of playground for the Swedish Sami culture, that we said that, okay, history has given us this inheritance. We have a scattered Sami cultural life here, and we need to invent ourselves out of that situation. And then we need to organize the inventive part. How can we do things here? And one way to generate ideas for how we can do this, because these two challenges, the one is to get the Sami culture up and happy again, and the second is to get an ignorant Swedish population enlightened and able to enjoy the presence of Sami culture. So that is my dream is a playground.
Gito, and that's a good idea. And I would address a question to Leah. I really liked to hear your speech talking about importance of language and also about your dreams. I would like you, Leah, to tell us a little bit more about the dream, because I was filled with joy and happiness. What is your dream? Could you say something more about that?
Well, my dream was that we can build up strong Sami institutions and a whole culture sphere where we can have Sami cultural professionals working on every level. Like for example, writers here in Sweden. I represent the Writers Center in Zalagohte. We have very few editors in Sami, publishers, libraries. We have one which is understaffed and underfinanced. To have that kind of system to educate our culture workers, but also have the system where they can find work to make art and live of it, instead of going to Norway, for example.
I think a good point. We have this brain drain to Norway, and in that meaning that there are job opportunities in Norway in so much better and so much numbers than in Sweden. And I understand that in Finland it's very difficult. And not speaking of Russia, I'm really sending my thoughts across the borders to Russia and the people who are working with Sami cultural and other issues concerning the Sami community there. So I would say that it's hopeful. Leah, I will take you in again. When you look at, I see you as a young person, around 30 maybe. But what is your feeling about the younger generation? Is there like an activism? Is it hope? Is it things are going to change? Could you say something to an older man that doesn't know anything about that?
Well, I see that young people are much more aware of their rights and are engaged in all politically and have much more platforms to reach out, to communicate with each other across borders between the majority society and the Sami society. So there's wills, capability, and hope.
So there is hope, and maybe a playground in the future. And as I said, I follow you, Amanda, to the Department of Finance. Just call me. I'm thinking we're getting closer to the end, and I have hope, but I'm also tired. And do you want to wrap something more up before we are leaving the floor to Vimme? Hopefully, he's on in a minute or two or five from Finland.
I think that the wisest words have flown out of our mouths now.
Said the king. Yes, and hopefully we will have Vimme Sarri on online from Finland?
Tapele,
Ah,
I'm ready.
yes.
Sen
So,
vaan Karpis ja valmis.
so Vimme, give us something to dream of, please.
Niekui ja pääjäpunsi falta nere huaivin ja niekaran ja wainaan. Takalman ainu ko piakkono no 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 Natakalman ainu ko piakkono no 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 Vayambe kanyo na jagana na 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 Vayambe kanyo na jagana Na dagaman nano kopyakalo na voya Agero nasamite ahtena ja volkilo no mannet järvan jovele järvan go ja Pori Vahkulohpa. Hei, päällekin.
Olgito, Vimme. That was the closing act. I hope you are doing fine out there. We thank you from here and the producers who was here. We will stand here and wave to you
Okay.
as ending.
Yes.
Good work, everybody.
See you.
Alogito.
Welcome.
Alogito.
Keitto, Jin.
Tack så mycket.
Tack.
Hey.
Tack Amanda.